Hey everybody, welcome to Module 2.2, where we're going to talk about story structures and state control. In our last lesson, we mastered choice architecture by learning how to write cosmetic choices, avoid blind traps, and build meaningful dilemmas. Now you're probably eager to give your players total freedom. You want every choice to branch off in a wide, brand new path, leading to different rooms, different characters, and dozens of unique storylines. And that brings us to the biggest threat facing every narrative designer, and that's state explosion. In narrative design, state explosion, also called combinatorial explosion, is the rapid exponential increase in the number of unique story paths, flags, and variable combinations that occurs when a story branches out based on player choices. Every time a game tracks a new decision, the total number of possible world states multiplies, making the writing and testing load impossible to manage. Look at the math. If every passage gives the player two choices, and every choice creates a completely unique new passage, a simple 10-choice story requires 1,024 unique passages. A 20-choice story requires over 1,000,000. No studio in the world has the time or budget to write 1,000,000 passages for a 20-minute game. If you try to write pure exponential branching, your project will collapse under its own weight. So how do professional narrative designers give players the feeling of total agency without melting their writing schedules? We use structural topology. Structural topology in interactive media defines how narratives and gameplay spaces connect. The four core models are the time cave, the branch and bound, the gauntlet, and the modular hub, each shaping player choice and pacing differently.
Let's look at these in detail. First, in the time cave, every choice splits into two or more unique paths that never recombine. A real-world video game example of this is a choose-your-own-adventure style games, like the Stanley Parable.
This is the story of a man named Stanley. Stanley worked for a company in a big building where he was employee number 427. Employee number 427's job was simple. He sat at his desk in room 427 and he pushed buttons on a keyboard. Orders came to him through a monitor on his desk, telling him what buttons to push, how long to push them, and in what order. This is what employee 427 did every day of every month of every year. And although others might have considered it soul-rending, Stanley relished every moment that the orders came in, as though he had been made exactly for this job. And Stanley was happy.
The Stanley Parable utilizes the time cave in designing both gameplay and narrative design. Every choice splits into two or more unique paths that never recombine. When making a single wrong or unexpected turn immediately triggers an ending. The game forces you back to the beginning to explore a completely different branch. This differs from our next narrative pattern, branch and bound, which branches locally based on player choices, but systematically reconverges onto a shared bottleneck passage.
So in this lab, we're going to build a branch and bound comb structure in Twine. The reason for this is I feel like it is one of the best ones that illustrates all four by being part of just one. So our story will branch into two distinct tactical paths, and it'll track the player's choices via variables. It'll merge back into a single bottleneck node and recreate dynamically to what the player did. So make sure to open Twine, and then we're going to create a new story by clicking the new button here. And we're just going to name this one Comb Structure. And go ahead and click on Create. Alright, go ahead and select your first node here, double click it. For the path name, I'm going to name this Start. And I'm going to pause the video and go ahead and enter the text for the body. Alright, so it says you and your companion Mara reach the outer gate of the ruined forest. 2 sentries guards the main entrance, while an old drainage pipe runs beneath the west wall. How do you proceed? Do you charge the sentries with weapons, or do you sneak past the muddy drain? And you can see that we have path assault and path stealth here. So let's go ahead and close this out, and here's our path assault and path stealth. Let's go into path assault and take a look at how we're going to take these two branches and essentially bring them back together. Alright, so here you can see we've set this tactic variable to assault, and we set the noise to true. You draw your blade and charge. You defeat the sentries in a fierce duel, but the clashing of steel echoes across the courtyard. It says proceed into the courtyard, bottleneck courtyard. Well, if we go in here, you can see this path is connecting to this bottleneck courtyard. So if we go inside of here, and let's go ahead and enter the text for. Notice that the tactic variable is still set to stealth. The noise is set to false here when it was set to true here. It says you crawl through the foul drain pipe, slipping past the perimeter undetected. You emerge quietly behind a stack of wooden crates. But notice here that both of these are connecting to, and they're pointing to, the same node, bottleneck courtyard. And we can take a look at the whole parameters like this. And you can see we're still giving them both choices, and instead of having a million different choices, we're giving them the thought that we are providing them with multiple choices, but they still lead back to the same bottleneck. And narratively, it makes sense because at the where the courtyard is, we are they both kind of, whether you're going through a drainage pipe or you're going full line, you end up in the courtyard. So essentially another way of saying this is notice that both path assault and path stealth link directly to bottleneck courtyard. So we've merged the two branches back into one model. All right, so if we open up bottleneck courtyard here, you can see here we have two if statements. So you step into the central courtyard of the fortress, right? We're reestablishing where we're coming from. Alarm bells overhead, right? If this is true. And this courtyard is dead quiet. Sentries pace the upper ramparts, completely unaware of your presence. Mara whispers, good work. We have an elemental of surprise. Now, this is a problem here. Notice the sanctum door here with the underline. You want to make sure, like that was actually a mistake on my part. It can error out if you have an underscore there. So I sometimes just through programming habit, I'll put an underscore, but make sure to not have underscores in the name. So you approach the inner sanctum, so you can see that it goes a step down. And then we just want to do more of an establishing thing here where you stand before the grand doors of the inner sanctum. Tactic is assault, right? And tactic is stealth. So here we go. Because you fought at the front gate, your arm is dented, but your heart rushes with adrenaline. So these are the two variables. If tactic was assault or tactic was stealth, we finally give them two options. But both options are tied to a single node. So again, even though it seems like it's branching out, we're using one node with an else if statement here to establish what the final outcome is. So let's save this and let's go ahead and let's see, start our story from up here, or test from here rather. And we can follow our variables from the bottom here. You and your companion Mara reach the outer gate of the ruined fortress. Two sentries guard the main entrance while an old drainage pipe runs underneath the western wall. How do you proceed? Do we charge the sentries directly with weapons, or do we sneak through a muddy drainage pipe? Let's do it. You draw your blade and charge. You defeat the sentries in a fierce duel, but the clashing of steel echoes across the courtyard. Proceed into the courtyard. You step into the central courtyard of the fortress. Alarm bells blare overhead. See, we're gonna, again, so much for a quiet entrance, and then you approach the inner sanctum. You stand before the grand doors of the inner sanctum. Because you fought the front gate, your armor is dented, but your heart rushes with adrenaline. You kick the door open with a thunderous crash. And you can see here the variable tactic is set to assault, and the noise is set to the Boolean value of true. And this is what got us to our last resort. And remember this, because you fought at the front gate. Let's take a look at this. Back at Entwine, we go all the way down here, and it's true. I did assault actually, and it says because you fought at the front gate, and there's the rule. So this is a good, keep these videos, keep this way of structuring, because if you're writing narrative for your own games, it's important. So I'm going to show you an example right now of how I'm thinking about Twine to write my own dialogue for my own video game. So I personally like to go between Godot and Unity. So I'm just going to press play here for a minute, just so you can see the dialogue system. Now, as a first pass, I'm going to be using something similar to what I just taught you for branching, where I'm going to allow the player, let's give this a second to start up. And come on. So it says phone rings, incoming call. Dad, Noah, can you hear me? Yes, Dad. So you have these different options here. What happened? I'm on my way. Are you okay? Now with this particular section, notice it's like I can say what happened, I'm on my way, or are you okay? And they provide different textual answers, but they all end to the same thing. I love you, hang up, and move on. And so then within this, you can run around the level. And as I'm planning out even simple dialogue, this is kind of the first thing that we talked about. I can click on this robot and it gives me single tier dialogue, and that's like from the first lesson of this class. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and as we continue to build out our understanding of both writing as a thing with things like the hero's journey or Dan Harmon's, you know, take on that, as well as using Twine as a tool for planning our own narrative. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I'll see you in the next one.